Hello everyone and welcome to another video where we rank aspects about the game Geometry Dash, this time covering all of the different game modes available. I want to see what the community overall views to be the worst and best game modes that you can play in this game, achieving some objective results. This survey is also including the upcoming 2.2 game mode Swing Copter, since there has been a community-made version of it available for years. I have also gotten the chance to play the game mode myself in a leaked 2.2 version, and I can definitely say that it behaves mostly the same. Foreshadowing. I also want to mention some early statistics right out of the gate, since I wanted to present the results of what kind of players participated in this survey. To my surprise, 44.63% of users who participated in this survey either placed the game on their mobile device or with 60 FPS. But it would still appear the majority of the votes will probably be somewhat influenced by the frame rate bug that has been prominent in this game for the past 8 years. And considering that 40.48% of users who participated in this survey has beaten at least one extreme demon, we will probably be seeing results skewed towards the top player territory. But this was expected, so it's just something that I want to show you and have you keep in mind when you see these results. With that said, let's start off this list by talking about the game mode you all view to be the absolute worst. Oh, how surprised? No, of course not. I think unironically, a pretty big majority of you expected to see this game mode at the very bottom, and I am no exception either. Well, look how right we were, with the overall score of the Swing Copter almost being below 5 and in the bottom spot. I will, however, start off with mentioning some positive comments from you all, because I will not have much positive things to say about this personally. Swing Copter is easily the best, despite not even being an in-game vehicle yet. I love how the movements flow, I love the challenges it brings to both the playing and creating sets of Swing Copter parts, and I love seeing it implemented into modern 2.11 levels. My one issue with it is that it's not particularly explored much these days, which is a shame. I feel like if creators ever bothered to branch out with it, it could have some real legs as its own game mode, and players would have to appreciate it more. I try to have at least one in my own level since I love it so much. Just wish others had the same enthusiasm for it as I do. Another one of you stated, "It's really fun and looks like it would be really cool to use in a duel and as a mini game mode. It feels like something that when used right, it can be amazing. My only worry is that people will struggle to make good gameplay with it at first, and the possible bugs in the physics of it." Well, unfortunately, it seems like you two are part of a smaller group. Out of over 400 votes, Swing Copter literally received only 1 vote for most loved game mode. Only 1. But to be fair to Swing Copter, I will say that originally I actually didn't have much hatred for it. I was rather indifferent to it for a while. It is practically by design the most inconsistent game mode in this entire list of game modes, but with some practice, the swing motion you get out of the dual ball version of the Swing Copter is actually relatively controllable in its inconsistent mess. So with my experience, the Swing Copter was just a meh game mode for me. That was until I played the Swing Copter in the leaked 2.2 version. And rubbed up, straight up, you f***ed it up. There are some comments from some of you that reflect my thoughts in the 2.2 version of this game mode to utter perfection. I hate this game mode. In 2.2, it takes all the worst aspects of player-made Swing Copters and dials them up to 20. The turning speed makes it incredibly clunky to use and gives the player the least amount of control of any mid-air game mode. Anything Swing Copter can do, Ship can do better. Originality-wise, it is something that is once again taken from user-made levels, but I must dock even more points because Ruptop made it feel like a Walmart version of those levels. Another one of you said, "Okay, I am very biased here. The dual ball Swing Copter is my absolute favorite game mode, but I just hate the 2.2 Swing Copter physics. It's way too slow. I would have given a much higher score to the dual ball Swing Copter." I was shocked to see how Ruptop's interpretation of the Swing Copter controlled in 2.2. Ruptop, I understand that you have to ease players into getting used into a new game mode, which is a concept you've introduced in your main levels to genuine perfection at times. But considering the entire community has already gotten used to something much more agile, and the vertical movement of ship, wave, and ball is way faster than this thing, why would you make it like this? You were inspired by the controls of a community-made game mode in your own game, and you decide to make it twice as heavy to maneuver? I know this is pretty much a clear demonstration of me not liking the change to something I've been used to for years, but even outside of that, I can't possibly see how this is a better version than what we already have. And I can already hear some of the counters to this saying, well, it is a leaked version of a game update that hasn't come out yet, so the swing copter is still subject to change. And yes, that would be 100% correct in normal situations. It wouldn't be fair to critique parts of a game that haven't been finished or released yet. But in this case, RobTop has already presented the game mode in public with levels already designed around the physics of this swing copter. So to me, it already seems like this decision to have this heavy turning ratio on this game mode is set in stone. And if the counter to this statement is that you can just change it again, in this case it will bring up a couple of issues. Normally in game development and in indie development too, you would ensure that the core gameplay mechanic isn't altered once you start creating levels around it. If you attempted to change the game mode functionality after there have been levels built around the game mode, those levels are immediately influenced by this change and will potentially need to be rebuilt again to suit the new physics. That will be a waste of development time, which at this point RobTop doesn't have, since Google and Apple are practically telling him to f*** off with his slow speed. And considering that the first sneak peek level has a swing copter section built around this momentum, this will probably and very likely be the official release. So long story short, unless RobTop decides to be reckless and change the game mode after already building levels with it, this is what we are going to get with 2.2, which already in the 2.1 version is overall deemed the worst game mode in Geometry Dash. Well, here's a massive surprise to me. Bear in mind, I did attempt to make this survey all the way back in 2019, and this is not the game mode that was deemed the worst out of the 2.1 game modes back then. But here we are. It looks like in the current update, the UFO game mode is deemed the worst in the entire game. Although that is 100% because of the originality score weighing it down, which is unfortunately unjustified. I'll go into why that is shortly, but I'll quickly establish what two of you state to be the negatives with this game mode. The UFO is violently average. It's the first of what I call a hybrid game mode. It combines the flying and floating of the ship with the discrete input of the cube. It's just a mid-air cube with all the pluses and minuses that implies. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's derivative, but its playstyle has been done before, even outside the game. But because of this, it's very consistent and easy to understand, since inputs cause, more or less, the same thing as the cube. Unfortunately, however, it lacks the versatility of the cube. It doesn't allow for different gameplay patterns too well, and so a lot of UFO gameplay feels stale and overdone. In addition to this, it also relies on muscle memory more than any other game mode, even at low-level difficulty levels, which is quite strange. I don't particularly enjoy the UFO, but it is not outright poorly designed. At worst, the UFO is just boring, and that's it. Another one of you said, the UFO is really just a cube with floatier physics where you can jump infinitely. It's got a slight disadvantage of the screen boundaries, but it's not that big of a deal. However though, the originality score is very low. It wasn't inspired by Flappy Bird, but rather by the real Darnox level, Gravity Field. It's just very unfortunate that everybody immediately associates it with Flappy Bird when they see it and the massive amount of Flappy Bird levels, including the one made by Darnox himself. They don't really do this game mode's originality any favor. I think these comments in particular are very valid statements to make about the game mode as a whole. Mentioning the biggest elephant in the room, yes, the UFO was in fact not inspired by what majority believe to be the inspiration. There are countless statements of you all saying that the UFO is a direct ripoff from Flappy Bird, but in reality, this genuinely isn't true at all. As the second comment states, it instead comes from RobTop being inspired by Darnox's user level Gravity Field. If you're looking for evidence backing this claim, here we have two images from a Touch Arcade forum where RobTop mentions where he got the inspiration from. The date of the RobTop's second comment from January 2014 indicate that the UFO game mode was implemented into the game before Flappy Bird hit mainstream popularity around 2 to 3 months later. As such, I unfortunately think that this misconception has tarnished the score, but we will be covering this aspect more later, don't worry. As for the other statements, yeah, there is some merit to saying that the UFO is just a cube that can jump infinitely, considering that is literally what the inspiration was trying to emulate. But I think because of the limitations of the camera, it doesn't allow for much variety. You click to jump with the UFO, and much like the cube, it jumps a certain distance. Without the camera, it quite literally is the cube with a smaller vertical reach per jump. But it wouldn't be fair to everyone without mentioning the people who like this game mode, and there's one comment I think explains everything that can be said about the potential enjoyment for this game mode. The UFO remains to this day my favorite game mode in Geometry Dash. Throughout all elements of its design, it is incredibly consistent. You can look ahead in the UFO part and figure out a deterministic clip pattern of precise timings that will work every single time. The physics of a UFO bumping its head on a ceiling, reacting to orbs, going through gravity portals, and the differences between size portals are all perfectly intuitive and work as expected every attempt across all refresh rates. The game mode is versatile for most of the same reasons as the ship, spanning the entire height of the screen, various different types of paths and clip patterns within the UFO parts available to players and creators alike. Originality is an interesting topic for the UFO. Today, everyone immediately draws a mental comparison to Flappy Bird, despite it having no traction and wasn't the inspiration for the game mode. Even if it was, the UFO can hit ceilings and floors without dying, and its interaction with the ceilings provides an additional layer of originality to its designs that even Darnock's experimentation with orb fields couldn't replicate. Plus, the UFO has a real weight to it. The speed at which it falls in the regular and mini versions of the UFO is slow enough to distance itself from the other game modes and provide a completely unique experience. This person had way more things to say, and unfortunately I had to cut some of it out, but I'm sure he managed to get his point across even in this format. I find it difficult to disagree with anything here. The core design of the UFO game mode is indeed incredibly consistent since the input is exactly the same every single time. And unlike the Swing Copter, where the added weight to the game mode, at least to me, is detrimental to the quality of said game mode, the weight of the UFO is in its favor here. I definitely don't think that the UFO deserves to be all the way down in the 7th spot, and it is definitely the misconception surrounding the originality of the game mode that lands the game mode in the second last spot on this list. Pretty much nothing changed with its placement for this game mode. The survey back in 2019 landed this game mode on the 6th spot, and now in 2023 it has landed in the exact same spot, which is where we find the robot game mode. I think I'll let you all speak for me here before I start talking about what I feel towards the game mode once more. Robot is literally just a cube game mode, but instead of a set distance that the icon jumps, you decide how long the jump distance is by holding to make a big jump and micro-clicking to make a little jump. So this makes for relatively inconsistent gameplay to experience, as it heavily relies on timing as a core mechanic, and so the gameplay can be very inconsistent without practice. Versatility excels the robot game mode much like the ship does, however. A game mode that uses momentum as a core mechanic usually has thousands of levels with exceedingly different clip patterns, which makes for a game mode with a lot of variety. But as I already said, the robot is just a cube except it has momentum, so it isn't very original, but the game mode overall is very good once mastered. I think this is a valid statement for the most part. A game mode that allows for vertical control of the jump opens up to a ton of variety of what can be done with this game mode. I would like to believe that personally, I have been able to demonstrate the brutal capabilities of the robot, especially with my messing around layout Volnix. The robot game mode is yet to be fully explored in what can be achieved difficulty-wise, but considering that this game mode only ended up in 6th place, it should probably attest to why that is, especially in a community scarily obsessed with difficulty. Which I would say this comment from one of you demonstrates quite nicely what some of you think. Robot. I cannot say it any more clearly. Robot has all the bad things about ship and cube. It's incredibly stressful and inconsistent and hard to control. If Ball has the best timings, Robot has by far the worst timings. It's thoroughly unoriginal, it is literally just a cube with a temporary ship boost, and while theoretically it could be used for a bunch of cool stuff, every time I see it in a demon it's just cancerous, painfully inconsistent microclicks that make my fingers suffer and slowly destroy my will to play the level. Jesus, man. I will say that I can understand your immense hatred towards robot sections in demons, since truthfully, some of them are complete damn misery to deal with. But I wouldn't say it is fair to pin the game mode's overall quality on the inability of creators. That happens regularly in the game every single day with all the game modes. But I think this upcoming comment is probably more grounded and fair in its criticism towards the game mode. A problem that I have with the robot game mode is that it's way too precise for a game like Geometry Dash. All the other game modes up until this point are very simple. You either tap for something to happen or you hold for an indefinite time, but the robot actually has a cap as to how high it can go, and considering we already have a jumping game mode, the cube, it's hard to make gameplay exclusively for the robot without it being either a microclick hell or a part completely based on release timings, which for me is not very satisfying at all. You want to be clicking with the music, not releasing, but if you don't do that, then it becomes simple gameplay that the cube could probably do, so there's no point on it being a robot part. I think this is actually very fair and not something I originally considered. Most of the time, the robot sections in levels aren't really made as an exclusive to robot only, but a cube can also deal with it just fine. I also believe that this once more reflects on the creator's creative ability, but there's merit to this line of thinking. But I think Robot finds itself down here on this list for that reason, alongside with players not really being able to handle the vertical control. So while I don't think that the Robot is bad, far from it, I suppose I can understand why players have decided to put this game mode so far down on this list. Here is the biggest shocker for me in this entire survey. This game mode ended up in last place back in 2019, and now it is above game modes like Robot and UFO. In 5th place, we find the Spider, and I don't really know what I can say about it right out of the gate. I have to resort to the comments from you all once more. Some of you are showing a lot of love for this game mode. Spider is definitely one of the more polarized game modes. Some people love it and some despise it. In my opinion, it's only good if done right. Fast-paced Spider gameplay can be some of the most enjoyable stuff in this entire game. On the other hand, some Spider gameplay is the most boring and frustrating crap in this game. It's not very original either, basically a copy of the ball but faster. Another one of you says, Spider has to be my favorite game mode, because there's really nothing bad about it. It makes for some insanely satisfying and consistent gameplay. Specifically, 4x speed mini Spider makes for the most intense and satisfying gameplay in this game, especially in harder levels. It's just a shame that most Spider gameplay is generic and boring, because I feel it is the hardest game mode to make good gameplay with. This second comment I especially resonate with in terms of the second part of it. I have struggled for years and years trying to make anything gimmicky or unique with the Spider game mode. It feels like by default it makes it one of the least versatile game modes in the entire game. The Spider game mode still feels new and unexplored after all these years. Usually with other game modes you have a pretty cool idea for how to approach them, or what you can do to stand out, but most of the time you see the exact same design with Spider gameplay parts. I think only after I've written this part of the script have I begun to realize why. My theory as to why this is a problem for this game mode in particular is that perhaps it is too simple to be experimented with much. Literally all the other game modes has momentum that can be manipulated one way or another, whereas the Spider teleports immediately to its new location. It feels oddly restrictive as a result, and it makes the general control of this game mode extremely limiting. This comment from one of you adds to this theory of mine even further. The Spider game mode is essentially a ball with its stat sliders lopsided in favor for consistency. The instantaneous swap up and down provides a layer of consistency that simply isn't present in the ball game mode, but comes at the cost of the lowest versatility of any game mode, as levels have to be built in very specific ways in order for Spider gameplay to work without skips. The ability to spam gravity swaps with the Spider can make for satisfying gameplay, but Spider parts typically have nothing to offer in comparison to other game modes, typically consisting solely of flat surfaces with uninteresting obstacle patterns. The originality gets a similar boost in score to the Robot, with its visual appeal and design being unique without being too out there. However, due to it being even more derivative in terms of gameplay concept, it doesn't score quite as high. I say this is a good way of summarizing the general reason as to why the Spider finds itself down here on this list. I am a firm believer of that there definitely is a possibility that the Spider has approaches to gameplay design that is yet to be discovered, which could influence the scores of these aspects if they were to hit mainstream. But unfortunately, it will probably remain the way it is now for a while, due to versatility being rather lacking. That combined with the rather consistent functionality of the game mode lands this game mode in 5th place on this list. Can I just say right out of the gate, I hate not being in control of this game mode. Aside from the swing copter, which suffers from the exact same issue, the ship game mode drives me f***ing crazy sometimes. Before I get into why I have these feelings towards this game mode, I'm just going to start with mentioning those of you who love this game mode, since I will genuinely just have too many negative things to say otherwise. It was hard to choose between them, but I like the ship the most. First of all, it feels incredibly fair. The simplicity of it makes it easy to understand, but it can be utilized in many more complex ways in harder levels. However, it is still incredibly fair. You hold to go up, release to go down. It's as simple as that. And not only that, but good ship gameplay flows really well, and it's just generally blast to play. Even in Stereo Madness, more skilled players can test their ship skills by trying to strafe-fly. Even in easier sections, more skilled players can play around and do something that challenges them. The game mode is amazing, fun for all skill levels, fun in general, and a solid 10 out of 10 for me. Another one of you said, "It's such a satisfying game mode and you always feel like you're improving with it. Strafe-fly is overdone a bit, but I still love how satisfying it is to just beast through a gap never thought to be possible when the game mode was first conceived. It's just a really fun game mode and I love it." I fear that my perception of the game mode is heavily skewed as a result of the difficult levels I've played over the years, because usually strafe flying is a very common approach, and that is what makes the ship's inconsistencies truly stand out. The ship game mode's vertical speed isn't influenced by the vertical speed it may already have in the moment, so as soon as you try to keep the ship straight, it is incredibly unreliable since the game mode's gravity and lift speed is identical no matter what. This is perfectly fine for levels like Stereo Madness or other levels that may pose a bit of a challenge, but as soon as you start going for the really difficult stuff, it becomes wretched. If you want my opinion on the game mode to be somewhat generalized, I think this comment in particular is what describes majority of my thoughts toward the game mode. The ship game mode is easily the most versatile game mode in Geometry Dash. A combination of its speed in both the regular and mini sizes and its ability to span the entire height of the screen allow for a massive amount of gameplay variety. Even the smallest differences in clip patterns can result in vastly different paths that the ship takes, which means that players and creators alike can mess around with the movements and clip patterns they want to perform, to traverse and or build difficult ship parts. Unfortunately, this comes at the significant cost of consistency. The ship is solely responsible for the vast majority of terrible game mode transitions in just about every level of difficulty in the game, and due to refresh rate differences, bug fixes to these transitions sometimes end up making them even worse for some players. The only aspect I would disagree with here is probably ship being the most versatile game mode. I think I'd rather give that to the cube game mode. But every other statement here is spot on for me. This comment resonated with me perfectly. I have a feeling some of you will heavily disagree with the ship being inconsistent, but truly, there are so many comments from y'all saying the exact same. The ship's physics makes it inconsistent at its core. Another one of you said this: ship will always be an important part of Geometry Dash due to it being the first feature to set this game apart from the Impossible game. That being said though, ship often feels really frustrating and inconsistent to play, especially on lower refresh rates, and I would argue is the biggest cause of the skill divide between mobile and PC players. Admittedly, ship is a very versatile game mode, and I think it shines best in ship parts with set clip patterns. It's unfortunate though that a lot of ship gameplay, especially in top levels, focus on strafe flying as it is a terrible representation of what you can actually do with ship. I also think it's noteworthy that it's the only game mode where two major changes to the game's physics have been made to make it more playable for all people. Those changes being the tweak to ship physics in the 2.0 update and the standardization of input delay in 2.2. No other game mode has caused this much of a divide before. I believe with how divided the community is toward the game mode, the result is that the ship game mode ends up in the 4th spot on this list. Definitely not a bad game mode, far from it, but to me it definitely suffers from the issues mentioned previously. Now we have arrived at the game mode with easily the lowest originality score out of all of them, which is definitely understandable considering the main inspiration for the entire game. Here we have arrived at the cube game mode in 3rd place, and to me this is easily the most versatile game mode in Geometry Dash, further suggested by the highest versatility score of 7.341 out of 10. I probably couldn't give praise enough to what this game mode is able to accomplish in terms of versatility. I'd be here all day, so I'm just going to once more go ahead and let you all speak for me here. While it's an incredibly common trope, see the Impossible game, Space is Key, and pretty much any other platformer game, the cube's concept is used so often for a reason. It is a very versatile game mode with the ability to be used pretty much anywhere, and what it lacks in mid-air control is completely offset by how it forced the player to make choices regarding their jump timing. It's no surprise that it is used in practically every level. This is one aspect I didn't originally consider, the fact you are very likely going to find a cube part in every Geometry Dash level. Usually when you don't, it's a result of someone trying to deliberately avoid it or to go for a specific gameplay theme. It is an immediate go-to for when starting a level most of the time, despite all the variations you are able to select between. I suppose it could be argued that this is because it is the default game mode option, but truly, would you always start a level with a swing copter if that was the default option? Please let me know in the comments and I won't read them. Going back to the comments from the survey, there are some of you that do address the Impossible game comparison, but states that it goes way beyond what the game achieves. Cube isn't too original because a game that already had almost the exact same kind of game mode was the Impossible game. The only thing keeping the two games separate is how the cube in the Impossible game is much harder to get used to, and other than that, they're basically identical to each other. But when you take orbs and pads into account, the cube in Geometry Dash is much more fun and varied in its gameplay, so it gets more versatility points. But it does lose some originality because without orbs and pads, the cube game mode is no different to the Impossible game. Cube is just fun to play in general. I'm pretty much saying the same. It's not the most original game mode ever made, but it doesn't always have to be when the core game mode takes existing ideas and improves upon them. It gives Geometry Dash a reason to exist and to be played more than the Impossible game as a result. Normally, I would at this point mention that there are negatives to bring up regarding the game mode, but truly, neither you, all, or myself have something significant to mention. Most of the negative comments made regarding Cube would be subjective experiences that doesn't reflect on the game mode itself or its, well, skill issue. The only major downside to this game mode seems to be what was mentioned previously, the originality, which I wouldn't even hold it accountable for since it improves from the original inspiration. The only reason this game mode doesn't find itself at the very top is the originality score. But despite that, it managed to reach a top 3, which it is more than deserving of. Whoa, this is not what I expected to see up here, beating both Cube and Ship. Judging from the score though, without the originality score, Cube would have easily beaten this one. But it seems that players in 2023 prefer the ball over the ship now. So in 2023, the ball game mode is deemed the second best in the entire game. Since this game mode is personally one of my favorites, I'm gonna go ahead and bring some comments that have some more negative statements regarding it. Ball is a concept that I've seen done by other games as well, notably VVVVVV. An issue I have with it is that the player doesn't move on a linear path. Instead, they switch gravity and then accelerate in the air. This is subtle, but makes it feel less responsive as the player takes a slight moment to start moving. That aside, it's just limited. You only have 2 real movements you can do, up or down. But unlike the Cube, it doesn't really synergize with gameplay elements as well. This is particularly noticeable with platforms and slopes, where they can often feel clunky to use. Upon considering this whole game mode survey inspection, I think the acceleration of the ball's gravity switch indeed makes the game mode worse. In VVVVVV, the gravity flip is pretty much constant. The tiny bit of acceleration that may be noticeable is barely discernible. And as a result, it doesn't feel clunky, the movement is responsive, and it feels like you're going exactly where you want to go. The ball flip, however, is not this fast. It takes a bit for the ball to hit max speed, which isn't something you're going to take note of until you start doing more difficult gameplay with it. It's just not agile enough for some things in this game, and feels unnecessarily clunky as a result. It is definitely the biggest issue with the game mode as a whole, since clearly, the core game mode idea on its own was good enough for an entire game. One of you said this: ball is just so satisfying to play. When a gameplay is well done, it feels so good swinging from the top to the bottom with the gravity effect. It is not that hard to make tricky ball gameplay, because every orb fits really well with the ball. Spike gameplay also fits really well, because the sides of the spikes and the trajectory of the ball have a very similar angle. It can be played in many different ways. Another one of you said, I love the reaction time and feeling of playing with the ball game mode, and always have ever since I played Cycles 8 years ago. In further testing, I personally discovered some amazing gimmicks with the game mode, being able to roll it beneath the ground and discovering that it is the only game mode able to bounce off itself while in the dual mode, leading to some unique gameplay unlike that of any other game mode in dual form. The ball also allows for gravity desync and unique setups for even other game modes. That's yet another aspect I didn't consider. The ball game mode is genuinely able to make other game modes more versatile because of its capabilities. The ball in dual mode is also the reason the swing copter was invented in the first place. It really just goes to show that the ball is very versatile to aspects I did not even think about, and it's so cool to see that this game mode is being given the recognition it deserves and lands itself as the second best game mode in Geometry Dash. Well, fun fact for you all, this game mode did not win back in 2019. In fact, it was the Cube that just clutched the win back then. But now in 2023, here is our winner for what is deemed the best game mode in Geometry Dash, the Wave. The praises towards this game mode is literally innumerable, so I'm just going to point out some of the negatives some of you said out of the gate, just to ensure that has been covered. Wave is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provides players with the most control of any game mode, making it objectively the hardest. On the other hand, it is so limited movement-wise that nobody makes remotely original gameplay with it. There's not much room for synergy with game mode elements besides gravity switching ones and dash orbs either. Another one of you went even harder and said this: I genuinely hate the Wave game mode, probably the worst game mode in my opinion, since most of the time people just couldn't make good Wave gameplay, and it honestly ruins the game mode as a whole. The amount of BS and shitty Wave challenges and Wave-based levels makes me hate the game mode even more. Okay, wow, these are going hard, but I think I will defend the Wave from some of these criticisms, since at least personally, I don't think that the game mode is difficult to create original gameplay with it, as I hoped I have managed to demonstrate over the years. It has a lot of vertical reach, and it is possible for it to hit orbs perfectly fine, and while I definitely don't think it has anywhere near the same versatility as something like the Cube and Ball, I think it does the job decently enough for it to be possible to experiment with. I also don't think it is fair to say that what garbage creators make is fair to entirely put the blame on the game mode itself. But do let me go harshly towards something I've already given a lot of crap in the past, since I do however understand this frustration. Absolutely the players and creators who have jerked the overall difficulty of this game mode in particular to mush. The skill difference between Wave and all the other game modes is so insanely high that the difficulty in some levels come from the Wave only, and that is treated as standard now. It makes some Wave sections and levels complete misery to play with. But thankfully, these issues I have mentioned is entirely situational, since the overall enjoyment I have, and many others do with this game mode, lands it in the first spot on this list, and even though it probably wouldn't be my personal favorite game mode, it definitely deserves being up here. I have so many positive comments from you all. The Wave is, hands down, the best game mode in my opinion. The ship wishes it had the consistency of the Wave. Unlike that game mode, it's extremely obvious how each input, held for however long, will affect the Wave so that it sidesteps my main problem with the ship, which was unpredictability and unmanageability. The Wave then produces the most consistent gameplay out of anything in Geometry Dash has to offer. The Wave liberates from the problems of the ship, thus allows an extreme variety of gameplay sequences. Its consistency and versatility work together to demand a high skill ceiling with a low cost of entry, a perfect recipe for a good game mode. The Wave plays like nothing else, and it'll always stand head and shoulders above the rest of the game modes. Its perfection genuinely stuns me. The best game mode bar none. I love the Wave ever since the 1.9 sneak peek came out. Not only is it visually the most satisfying game mode to look at, since it leaves a trail behind and it almost looks like a tiny rocket, but it's also the most consistent game mode, just up and down with no momentum. Out of all the other game modes, it's the one that can be buffed the most and still be fun. With the inclusion of D-blocks in the 2.1 update, it just made it even more versatile, allowing for more gameplay options that are just not up and down. Overall, just a great game mode, original, satisfying to look at, and very fun. Yeah, despite all my community cost issues I have with the game mode itself, I don't think I have any big complaints for this game mode, much like the Cube. Its core consistency is incredibly high, it brings with it a lot of versatility of what can be achieved with gameplay, especially ever since the 2.1 update, and the enjoyment rate has the highest score out of all the game modes. But I will however say one thing about the Wave's originality, because technically speaking, it is not particularly original. I don't think many people know this, but I believe Darnox's Wave level is actually inspired by an entirely different game. There's a game with the exact same name called Wave as well, and the concept is pretty much just like the Wave in Geometry Dash. This game has videos dated all the way back to early 2014, which is months before this first sneak peek from RobTop's 1.9 update showed up. And given that Darnox's level name is identical to the game's name and has a similar approach in block design, I think it is pretty fair to say that if people are going to call out the UFO and the Cube for being unoriginal, then the Wave falls in the exact same category. But as established in this video prior, this isn't automatically a negative thing. And much like the Cube and UFO, the Wave also elevates from its inspiration. It is perfectly fine to take concepts and ideas seen in other sources if you're willing to take those concepts and improve upon the original work. Wave is undeniably one hell of a consistent and potentially fun game mode, and became a very solid interpretation into Geometry Dash, so I can 100% say with confidence and certainty that the Wave game mode definitely is well deserving of being our #1 winner. And with that said, that concludes the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.